Welcome to EIG's 53rd webinar, and we wish you all the best, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is a fireside chat discussion with our guest experts from the industry, Dani Kaplan of SMC Data and Greg Schlegel at Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. And we're looking forward to an interactive discussion with your participation. Again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate that you're taking your time, all the time that you have for this webinar. Today's webinar fireside chat is on implementing end-to-end visibility with minimum business disruptions, and we're going to address three best practices to achieve supply chain control. The focus is to address the inventory dilemma with intelligent inventory visibility. Best-in-class people, process, data, and technology can solve fulfillment problems, improve cash flow, enhance customer experience, and increase revenue. Therefore, our discussions will focus on demonstrating that ERP implementations do not need to be disruptive. We look forward to an interactive webinar with polling and your questions in the Q&A. Please have your cell phone handy and enter into the window of your browser and log into the Poll Everywhere website, pollev.com/JimDeVries073. It's in the chat. Some background on EIG. Again, my name is Jim DeVries, founder, president of Enhance International Group. We're an exchange of passionate experts to guide your transformation to provide self-generating and self-funding benefits. We have over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers in our group that provide these best-in-class solutions. You could look at us as a Swiss Army knife. EIG serves as the master integrator to provide access to the best-in-class companies, and our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partners' tenured thought leadership experience. Our goal is to meet and exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day self-funding programs, providing you the competitive advantage. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us Dani Kaplan and Greg Schlegel. I'll ask Dani, who established SMC Data back in 2014. He's a tenured expert in ERP software, been around the block, so to speak. Dani, a few words of introduction.
Hi, everybody. My background is consulting. In '85, I made the executives regarding the manufacturing distribution software, Mapex and DMS. Currently, I represent for the past 25 plus years VAI, who is have ERP software, 200 people, and clients are entire USA, Caribbean, and Canada.
Thanks, Dani. And Greg, a few words?
You bet, Jim. Welcome, everyone. Greg Schlegel, the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. I've taught supply chain risk management for 10 years at Lehigh University. I teach ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, at Villanova. Spent 8 years with IBM as a supply chain executive consultant. Spent another 35 plus years as a supply chain exec for several Fortune 100 companies. I've taught supply chain management at 6 different universities. And way back when I was Apex, now ASCM president back in the late 90s. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And just as a reminder to everyone, this is, as I said earlier, the 53rd webinar. We have 2 to 3 webinars, up to 4 or 5 webinars a month. We'll be having upcoming webinars on digital twins, new product introduction, artificial intelligence, and the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's webinar series focus on 90-day action plans and upcoming on supply chain management readiness. So those webinars, look for at the EIG website for all the different webinars coming up. By this series and by our partners. There's a number of other webinars out there too with ESG and so forth. So with that, I would like to have Dani do a little bit of background on your company here and some of your things that you would like to share.
My background is consulting. I established my company in 1980, and in 85, I made them executives regarding the redistribution software called DMAS that used to freeze if we made a mistake and had to go back to last night backup. I had that utility that allow in 2 seconds to unflag the error, you're back in business. In 92, I was published in 3X400 computer magazine, where I helped a company go from $6 million to $45 million. I've done all the M&A technology integration in 7 years. And in 94, I was published in Crane magazine, how we help our client Blue Star automate the warehouse and achieve 33% inventory improvement. Currently, I represent VAI. It's a 200 employee company, nationwide, Caribbean, and Canada.
Thank you, Dani. Appreciate it. Greg?
Yep, give you a quick thumbnail sketch on this slide of the consortium, who we are, what we do. On the right-hand side, there's about 30 companies at the moment. That represents about 1,700 supply chain risk professionals around the world, including Jim and his EIG group. We operate in 23 countries. These companies that you see bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and software solutions, all in an effort to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. That's all we do. What do we provide? Well, on the left-hand side, we provide online education. We have 2 courses that are online, self-paced on supply chain risk and resiliency. You receive a certificate from us. Virtual training like this, Jim and I cross between EIG and the consortium. We do about 3 or 4 webinars a month for the last 18 months. Classroom training, boy, wouldn't we all love to have face-to-face classrooms again? We can hope. We provide certificates. We provide awareness and mitigation for companies. We bring supply chain risk and resiliency best practices from our best-selling book. We coach companies on the journey. We build out supply chain risk war rooms. We bring software solutions to do the heavy lifting in terms of risk management. And we now have 2 online assessment tools. One is supply chain management readiness, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. And the other one is an online prescriptive 90-day action plan using AI and ML. That's a quick thumbnail sketch.
Thanks, Greg. And just a little bit of background on EIG. We're an exchange of passionate experts that guides transformations to provide self-generating and self-funding results. As we mentioned before, we have over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers globally that enable your enterprise. That are focused on you, the customer, and EIG serves as that master integrator between these companies and you. And we act as that Swiss Army knife, providing you the best in class providers. We have, as you can tell with today's panel, we have a lot of expertise in many different areas. And our goal is to meet and exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day self-funding programs. Reviewing the slide here, one of our favorite slides we built a few years ago. It's modeled as a company's ecosystem with the 2 wheels linking strategy on the right and execution on the left. The 2 geared wheels are connected by a chain through tactics between the strategy and execution wheels. And of course, the larger wheel of strategy showing that it rotates at a slower rate than execution. So one rotation in strategy results in many execution cycles. So since the front wheel moves a little bit slower and the rear gear moves a little bit faster, the result is, of course, that many execution cycles, in that we're able to drive with a good linked strategy many execution cycles. So driving that momentum, and for the employees, the customers, suppliers, and stockholders. So quoting Albert Einstein, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. So let's get moving on this webinar. This is the first in a series of webinars on implementing end-to-end visibility with minimum business disruption. And our second webinar will focus more on the demand side. And then our third webinar will focus on inventory. And then our fourth on suppliers. So that's how the webinars are laid out. You'll be hearing about our second webinar soon. We haven't set the date quite yet. With that, Greg, you want to kick us off?
You bet. Thanks, Jim. We thought we'd share this interesting finding from a survey from McKinsey back in June of 2021. It kind of demonstrates supply chain cause and effect, and it kind of reinforces the old boxing adage of plans are great until you get your first punch in the nose. So with that, it talks about the actions performed due to COVID. And so the companies they evaluated or interviewed originally planned to increase nearshoring of supplies to boost supply chain resilience. Sounds good. All right. Good strategy. But they wound up increasing inventory. Let's talk a little bit more. Down in the middle on the left there, planned and implemented actions. The black basically are actions related to nearshoring. The blue represent actions related to inventory, and the gray is other. So go over on the right-hand side, and first let's talk about what these respondents planned to do in 2020. You can take a look. Then the McKinsey folks said, what did you actually do associated with those action items? And that's what we want to talk about. First and foremost, take a look. Increasing inventory of critical parts. Well, that increased tremendously, not surprising during COVID. Dual sourcing of raw materials, not much change. Increasing inventory along the supply chain. Big increase, not a shocker. Regionalizing the supply chain, kind of the same, not so much change. Expanding backup production, pretty much the same. Reducing SKUs, stock keeping units in product portfolio, good idea, but it just never happened during COVID. And then finally, nearshoring production, pretty much the same. The net for this aha and finding to us is the quickest way to mitigate supply chain risk during COVID and during disruptions is to increase inventory throughout the supply chain. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Yeah, so we welcome your questions and comments on this, because I think it was very wishful thinking that we could regionalize the supply chain with everybody being strapped. I would suggest that we were not able to do a lot of the things we would have liked to do because folks aren't all that coordinated with up and down the supply chain. So things just swelled in different parts of the supply chain as we'll see the what I would call the whack-a-mole effect. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but we would all like to nearshore. We would all like to have, increasing the supplier base. But the bottom line is the unpredictability of the materials coming in cause us to overorder and underdeliver in many circumstances. And that's what we've been seeing. We welcome your comments I have Roy raised his hand. Can you put your comment in the chat, or do you want to Is that possible? Let me just, I'll let you talk, Roy. Go ahead.
Shooting.
There you go.
Okay, so you're responding here to COVID, okay? This year it's COVID, next year, who knows what? Who knows what's happening in the past? So wouldn't you want your clients to always be in an optimal position no matter what happens, COVID, who knows what, war or anything, rather than have to have a special response to COVID?
Greg, I know you have a good answer for this. We've talked about it quite a bit. So do you want to respond?
Well, the answer is yes. Here's what we see. Here's what we see. I'm not being flippant. Here's what we see. Essentially, because of COVID and all the disruptions over the last 2 to 3 years in supply chain, what we're seeing with our clients and what we're hearing in articles, in webinars, in podcasts, and on the TV is a discussion, robust discussion about, is it just in case, which is efficiency, or is it, just in time, which is efficiency, or is it a just in case, which is effectiveness and resiliency in supply chain? So for the first time in 30 years, everyone is talking about efficiency versus effectiveness. And that's going to be an individual, company, culture decision. But it is a robust discussion right now. That's my best answer.
Yeah, it's a very heated question. Any other comments, Roy? Or we move on?
Yeah. Back in 2001, if you were around, remember there was a dock strike on the West Coast.
Oh yeah. Well,
and the containers sat there for, I think it was something like 6 to 8 weeks. And my client's whole Christmas season was on the ocean and never reached his facility or any of his customers. And it came real close to putting them out of business. Okay. So again, when I talk about readiness, I mean, I talk to my clients about having a local source just in case.
yeah.
I talk to my clients about always overstocking A movers, but nothing else. So what I'm thinking is, again, like we don't know what's happening, but we should always be ready. If I'm doing just in time, I still want A movers around so it doesn't screw everything up.
Yes, absolutely. We agree that with those thoughts that you should be doing dual sourcing, especially if it's overseas, having different ways, local sourcing. I think that's what the trend is moving towards that. It's tough when you have products that are dependent on certain regions where that's the only region that you may have a unique component in your product. But regardless, in those cases, you may have to increase inventory. But what happened in that dock strike, for instance, which happens about every time they go up for renewal of their agreement, it's pretty predictable, that dock strike, that it's going to happen. So there's other ways to get around that particular event, because that would be a risk event on the supply side, for instance, but it's fairly predictable, where COVID was more of a unpredictable event. Some people would argue it was predictable, but I don't think that people would agree that it would have lasted. I don't think anybody knew how long it was going to last, how many waves we're going to have. Nobody could predict that. I think everybody agrees with that. And so now you're having both it on the supply side and the demand side, unlike the dock strike that we talked about there. All good examples of Suez Canal, where that got plugged up for a few weeks. There's a host of those type of events.
Okay, thank you. We could talk about this all day, so I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, we could go on forever. So thank you. Thanks for the comment.
The last comment is, I would say, always ready.
Always ready. Absolutely. That's a great mantra to have. We love that mantra. With that, we'll just move on, and we're not forgetting about the folks in the chat. We will get to you. We just want to move on to the agenda. any of these slides we could probably talk to at 20, 30 minutes. So we're moving on. We're not ignoring you. We will get to your questions. This is the agenda, and the goal here is to provoke discussion, not get through the agenda per se, but we start off with end-to-end enterprise data visibility. We're going to talk about ERP, importance of having a good ERP for robust supply chain capabilities, be able to actively control inventory in real time. And we were already talking about this whole, the pull, just in time challenge that we have. We have a case study and some benefits about having ERP software through these type of times. So with this, we'll just start with the cartoon that you may have seen and the webinar posting. And as you can see, you got your customer starting there on the upper left through transportation, warehousing, and manufacturing. So it's like, squeezing a big water balloon, and some people are going to like it, some people are not. Maybe the two people in the middle are happy, but everybody on the ends are a little bit frustrated. Suppliers are frustrated. Things are bulging out of control. So this is just a note, a cart or some neural marketing to the picture that we're all facing right now of increased warehousing on both sides, on supply and demand, and everybody kind of going like that gentleman, grr, and everybody kind of pointing the finger at someone else. Greg, Dani, comments?
Well, my first comment is if you've ever squeezed a water balloon, you can get a good laugh because it goes all over the place. All right. What we try to do in good supply chain management and good risk management is to keep the balloon within some type of control area. All right. That's why we bring up the water balloon example. So that's what we're living with on a day-by-day basis. A lot of cause and effect.
Dani, any comments on this from what you've been seeing and hearing?
Basically, it's today's reality that's not going to go away soon because we're dealing with forces that are beyond our control, politics, trade war, and tariff. And the new situation now with Russia and Ukraine will create a whole brand new angle to the whole supply chain factor issue.
Yep, certainly geopolitical risks are out there. Absolutely. And that's, we don't know what's going to happen there and how that's going to affect our supply chains. It may affect Europe's much more than it will affect ours, but regardless, it's going to affect us. And the market certainly has responded in that manner, as we know, taking a nosedive on the imminent possible war, which could happen at any particular time. So just to build on this slide, what happens is, we're showing here a declining sales and increasing orders. So what I'm seeing with my clients is they're actually, the orders are going up. There's more demand and maybe in a different type of product SKU than in the past, but causing declining sales because we can't get our source material. Meanwhile, our costs are going out of control, and we're saying, I think this is what happened at the beginning of the pandemic, and there were a lot of government supplements to help companies, but now we're letting it float, and of course we got inflation occurring. So, and meanwhile we're not able to deliver, and then of course we have the added challenge of not having enough people to man the line, so to speak, because of being out because of COVID. So a lot of things going on in this world of challenge. Any comments on this, Greg or Dani?
No, but we have someone with their
Roy.
hand up. Roy, is it Roy?
Well, let me
Well, why
take
don't
it
you
back
take the
down.
chat?
Sorry. I have to lower it. Sorry.
Okay,
Oh,
so
okay.
Greg, why don't you take the chat? In the chat, it says, Greg, is it true that the main reason for lack of proper implementation is that the lack of risk maturity in firms? It goes
I
back.
wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah.
It's what we have found in our 12 years.
Yeah.
Risk in supply chain is very new, and most of us, including Greg, when he was running complex supply chains, I cannot tell a lie. Basically, we were not thinking about supply chain risk. What were we thinking about? Revenue, cost, and asset turnover, because that's how we're paid. So, yes, violently in agreement. Yeah, violently in agreement
everybody
with
was
that.
in the cut mode. And it was hard to talk about risk a year ago. We were having a lot of problem with folks focused on just cut cost and trim. And then when you do have a risk event, of course, you know, you're gonna pay for that decision. There was another question in here. Please explain what is regionalizing the supply chain. So, Greg, do you want to go at that one, or do you want
Sure.
to...
It's pretty straight away. When execs say they're going to regionalize, that pretty much is code for saying I'm going to stop having someone produce my raw material 6,000 miles away, and I'm going to bring that over nearer to my final assembly. That's basically what we're talking about. We're talking about mitigating your risk, because if you have long lead times, that's a risk to your supply chain. That's what they mean by maybe bringing it in on North American soil, that kind of thing. That's the simple definition of nearshoring.
And the classic example is, of course, we're starting to make chips in the US again. Tesla building the plant, and a few other manufacturers building plants in the US. The chips, something we used to do. And of course, it takes 5 to 7 years to build a plant, but you got to start right away. So what you see is a lot of the companies that are dependent on overseas are onshoring, and it just takes a lot longer than anybody would care to want. But it's good to see that it's happening. And I think we'll see more of that. And what we used to see in the past on onshoring is even a group of competitors getting together to fund a supplier for a backup supplier for materials that is shared. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can be done, but of course, everybody has to agree to help that supplier out, that there's going to be sufficient volume to drive that supplier to be able to make materials. So there's a lot of creative things that can be done that I'm sure that many companies are looking at today. The next question here is asking about Ukraine. What are the top 3 risks that we need to plan for with if there's a war that breaks out in Ukraine? Any thoughts on that?
Wow, that's what is known as existential risk, folks. Haven't given it too much thought. All right. Again, we could talk for maybe a couple of days on that. All right. It could happen. You could call it a gray rhino. You could call it a black swan, but it's a strategic risk that everyone has to kind of evaluate. For us in the US, my first blush reaction, I haven't really thought too much about it, is cyber risk.
Yeah.
All right. All right. The bad guys are going to try to produce consternation and confusion. So shore up your IT systems. All right. Really. Because they've demonstrated, the bad guys have demonstrated that they have the capability to disrupt. That's the first and foremost. Next, you talk about supply chain. Yeah. If you got a supplier or a contractor in the country, I think you have to get on top of that real quick. Those are 2 that come right to mind, top of mind.
Yeah, just to build on the, if you have any materials or your suppliers is somehow sourcing materials from that part of the world or impacting your supplier network in some way, shape or form, that will certainly be impacted. So that's a great one, Greg. With that, I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Just to keep it moving, Greg, your readiness assessment.
You bet. You bet. We thought we'd make an injection here, as the cartoons have demonstrated, and some statistics have verified. We are living in what we call a VUCA world. What does that stand for? VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We just talked about that. It's part of our supply chain landscape now, and chances are will diminish, but it still is part of the landscape. So with that said, we, the consortium, have taken our 30 years of supply chain experience and our 12 years of doing risk management in supply chain, all right, and developed a supply chain readiness assessment tool that provides two assessments: supply chain management maturity and supply chain risk. I'll give you a quick thumbnail sketch. First, take a look. You see 13 tenets. In our point of view, those tenets make up an end-to-end supply chain. Most of you are probably aware of most of the tenets, all right? The star chart that you're looking at is a maturity model, and it depicts how mature a company's supply chain processes are within those tenets, and where the lower the number on the chart, the more mature the process is. As you go through, there's about 100 questions, maybe almost 9 to 10 for each tenet. As you go through the 100 questions of discovery, you can see a company's response in this chart. It's the black line. All right. So remember, the farther away the responses are from the center, the less mature the supply chain process. Secondarily, we developed risk levels within the maturity model. You can see the green circle, all right, which denotes where best-in-class companies operate. You can see the yellow circle, that denotes companies that are moving forward in their supply chain maturity. And the red circle denotes what we call our ring of fire. Any response near the ring of fire says that supply chain process is very immature, and which tends to provide a much higher risk within the supply chain. And finally, on the upper left is what we call a best-in-class rating, and that a company receives within this free tier 1 assessment. We have 3 additional tiers within this tool of sophistication and analysis, but that's for a later webinar. So back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So this is just a quick overview. So when you were talking about information systems, cyber, comes to mind, but any of these areas where you're in that ring of fire, you're going to be more susceptible to risks, and because you will not have, your SOPs and so forth. And Dani, any comments of what you've seen on this from this perspective as it relates to ERP or other things that come to mind?
The needs to have modern ERP became more essential now than ever, because you cannot rely on the fact that you have inventory available whenever you want to. Call the vendor, drop it to my warehouse or the customer. With today's reality, having real-time information is essential, or you're going to have severe business disruption.
Absolutely. Yeah, so becoming more mature in these areas will certainly help in any ERP implementation, in summary. So with that, I'm just going to move on to the next section. and on the importance of having an ERP. And we're just going to talk about supply chain operational reference model, which was developed in the 2000s, 2010. It was really formalized 2008, 2010 by a great group of people. And it's in the supply chain, under the Supply Chain Council, which now has been absorbed by the Supply Chain Management ASCM. So the root of this is plan, source, make, deliver, return. So those are the core processes that you have in every supply chain within your four walls. And that's the middle place on the slide where it says your company. And of course, you have your supplier on your left and your customer on your right. And the whole idea of calling it a supply chain is that these links, those ovals, are linked together into a supply chain. That's kind of how it was named. Now, the one thing that is very confusing to many people is just the word supply in front of chain, because it's more than supply. It's deliver, it's return, it's make, it's plan. So you could put plan chain, source chain, deliver chain, return chain. It's all part of supply chain. So that often confuses folks, and the people that were predominantly involved in this in the beginning just happen to be procurement people. So they won the draw to call it supply chain instead of something else. And so this is a program that you can take under ASCM, Association of Supply Chain Management. You can get certified in it. Highly, highly recommended if you haven't done so. This is really the main way to explain supply chain and should be part of everyone's vocabulary. And then ASCM has others, CSCP, and all sorts of different certifications that we would strongly recommend to get up to speed. But it's these lines, these dotted lines, is those handoffs that are where we're having the problems. And that's where the opportunity generally lies. And then things build up, your inventory builds up in the middle in your supply chain, in your four walls, but trying to get your folks and your company to look at it as that end-to-end supply chain, customers to suppliers. Greg, any few words from you on this?
That's pretty high level, but it does give you the folks on the call a sense of end to end. It's not procurement. It's not by discipline. Supply chain management is suppliers, and customers, and everything in between, folks.
Okay, Dani, any comments on this slide?
Yes, one factor to be considered, the cost of goods. It's very highly impossible to predict what the inventory will cost you when it comes to your warehouse. So you need to be able to have landed cost averaged, because one container can be $18,000, second one can be 20, and the other one be 16.
Mm-hmm.
So averaging the cost is an extremely important factor now.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially with escalating container costs, as you just mentioned, going up in the 20s now, from basically in the 4,000 range. Now we're up in the 20,000 range. It's crazy. So that delivery is going to be compounded into your cost of goods sold, which is the impotence for inflation, that it's kind of hard to stop until we're able to settle out that supply chain. So people say, when is it going to end? It's going to be when this stuff starts to settle. All right, Greg, your slide.
Yeah, we'll go real quick. This is a little bit of a deep dive, taking that previous slide, which is ASCM's end-to-end overview, and just taking a look at the basic elements, our point of view of the basic elements of supply chain management, especially if you're a manufacturer. Let's start at the top. Product design and engineering. If you manufacture a product, you're going to have engineers. Purchasing, both direct and indirect material. Production planning and scheduling of your finished products and so forth. Production monitoring and reporting. I'm going clockwise, down around. Management decision tools, sure. Sales and marketing out in the field. Yep. Product service out in the field. Customer account management. And then we're coming back up the back again. Distribution centers and warehousing. Order fulfillment process. Material and inventory management, which is our focus of today. You got logistics, inbound and outbound, and finally, again, supplier management. So kind of an end-to-end profile and a deep dive of our point of view of the elements, major elements in supply chain. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dani.
We have to consider the fact that supply is very scarce today. So you have to know who do you want to buy or purchase your product from. In the past, people was worried about give me the best price and compare one vendor to another vendor. That's past history. Today, the question is, how reliable is the vendor and how fast can you get your product?
Great point. Great point. Yeah. So the priorities have changed significantly, which leads us right into the Dani, your overview on what makes up a good ERP to manage this. So Dani?
Yeah, basically today, the major issue you have is controlling your inventory, knowing what you have available, and availability is a very complex issue now. You might have, it's not how much you have available on hand in the inventory as what you allocate for production, or what you allocate for future orders might be 6 months or a year from now. The fact that just in time is history and you rely on unpredictable supply chain now, you have to know not only what you have in inventory, the net inventory, you might want to have more inventory available than you think you do. Because you never know when the Suez Canal will happen or the war with Ukraine will happen and it will disrupt the entire supply chain. That brings us into an issue now of ERP software. You must have real-time information. You must know on a high level, graph, pie chart, analytic, what you have available in inventory, what you allocate for production, what you allocate for future orders, what's coming in, and being able to average the price. That's in a nutshell, it all ties together and has to be real time. You cannot do patchwork, buy warehouse management for one vendor and have ERP from the other vendor, because then you end up with integration issues. And when it comes to support, it's a famous last word, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, finger pointing, it's not my fault. The ERP must be totally integrated under one umbrella, one software.
Yeah, so Dani, I think you bring up a great point. There's so many ERPs out there, even the big famous ones out there, but they're not totally integrated. And to talk to different modules all the way from the suppliers, all the way to the customer, as we just discussed from an end-to-end perspective, and having that total integration in real time so you can understand where your risks are at any particular time, and you can send those alerts and you're able to see what your costs are and seeing escalating costs and make it visible. So that's why we're focused on visibility. Without visibility, we can't make informed decisions. And without real-time visibility, looking in the rearview mirror of a report once a day of what happened yesterday is not helping you work better tomorrow. So without having real-time visibility to be able to move to predictive types of decision-making, we will forever just be chasing our tail. And especially in this tumultuous time, you need to have this type of end-to-end visibility. Greg, any other comments?
From a risk point of view, I will say this. What you don't know about your supply chain can and will hurt you.
There's some background noise. I'm gonna mute somebody because real bad background noise. So yeah, say that again, Greg. I think the background was pretty bad.
Well, to work on the visibility thread, which is what we're talking about today, from a risk point of view, we always say what you don't know about your supply chain can and will hurt you. Pretty stark, but we've seen it a million times.
Yeah. Thank you. And we're about 12 minutes to the hour. So we're going to try to cover one major topic, and that is the bullwhip effect. And Greg, you want to lead us on that?
Yeah, sure. This kind of reinforces our discussion about the VUCA world. What's the bullwhip effect? We call it the bullwhip effect on inventory management. Give you a quick definition in the middle. It's the uncertainty caused from distorted information flowing upstream to your suppliers and downstream to your customers. This is kind of a build slide. On the left, we have demand. You can have the bullwhip effect on demand. What does that mean? Well, take a look at the left side of that box. It's the demand box. There's your customer on the left side. Any deviation or change in the amplitude of an order, sales from your end customer can manifest itself into a pretty ugly looking bullwhip effect by the time it goes upstream to your suppliers. You can also have it on the supply side. Take a look at that box on the top right. Essentially on the left, in the left-hand area of the box could be a foundry or your raw material manufacturer. They can experience a risk event and a disruption, and it will manifest itself downstream to the end customers. If you add both of the demand and supply shocks that we've all witnessed during the pandemic, if you add them together, you get what we call the W-like recovery. And you can see there's an x-axis. Those numbers are potential months just for explanation. And then you can see that we color code the latency in the bullwhip effect within a supply chain in terms of blue could be a retailer, red could be a wholesaler, green could be a distributor, and orange could be the manufacturer. You add demand and supply bullwhip effect together, like we've experienced for the last 24 months, you get what we call a W-like recovery. That's what we're all witnessing, no matter what industry you're in, no matter how small or how big. The latency in supply chain is basically what you're looking at, and we're wrestling with that every day. I think we have questions.
Yeah, I think we have one person who volunteered a sentence that you taught them back in Cape Town a number of years ago. You fight like a train.
You fight like you train. If you don't train,
okay,
you get what you get.
There you go.
Yep, it's a U.S. Army mantra. You fight like you train. If you don't train, which we see a lot of clients who do not train either on performance or risk, you will get what you get if you have a risk event.
And then we have a comment from, doesn't the bullwhip effect require each player to overreact to the change in demand by their customer?
Well, sure, it's human nature. It's the human DNA. All right, really, we're not trying to be glib or smartly here. That's a technical term, but essentially, sure. The human DNA says, you've burnt me a couple times, so I'm not going to believe your 20,000 pallets order. I'm gonna do 15 or 10. Yeah, it's human nature, and it's a matter of trust. See, that's what we haven't talked about. It's trust. Without the trust, you're going to get the bullwhip effect on steroids every time.
And another person asked, where are we at in the timeline of the W recovery?
That's a good one. It's a good one. Jim and I have put together many articles and webinars on the W-like recovery, and we have 3 phases. The first phase is respond, the second phase is recover, and then the third phase is renew. And we've gone through many, many webinars across the entire globe, all 9 regions of the globe, and it varies. A lot of folks are in what we call the recovery mode. They're attempting to build out their supply now, but the net, if you want an answer, we think it's probably going to get better in the 3rd quarter of this year. It's been almost 2 full years of the bullwhip effect.
Starting to settle down, not settle down, but starting, we think. So hopefully we're right for all our sakes. Well, it looks like everybody entered into this. This is fantastic. Part of the challenging you're seeing managing the bull effect. So thank you so much for entering in your comments. Demand, suppliers, yep, on both sides, absolutely, beautiful. Greg or Dani, I'll let you guys comment.
Well, I mean, it's great that that everyone's getting engaged. What you see here is this is a frequency table. The more frequent the same acronym or phrase comes in, the bigger the font. So, you know, demands, suppliers, you know, we wish there weren't that many, all right, but wishing is not a strategy. So we gotta do what we gotta do to mitigate the bullwhip effect over time.
Dani, any comments on what you see there?
Yes, the issue is that I see is having the supply affecting the demand. And we don't know where we are going to head to. We can predict until the cars come home, but reality will force us to face what's happening. The trade war and the Ukraine possibly might send upside down all the prediction that we have and all the analysis, because if there is a war and the ships are being disrupted coming to the USA, we have a brand new factor now to face with.
Yeah, great point. And the one thing that I see in here also, just to call out, is the shortage of skilled staff and expertise in many industries that are actually the industries that are moving our goods. We have a shortage of folks, and there's more and more digitalization and automation being developed to deal with the lack of people. So that's another hot topic that's coming out of this bullwhip effect. With that, we have 5 minutes to go. I think what we'll do is we're going to skip to the end, Dani, where you talk about the benefits of having. Why don't we go through the benefits of an integrated ERP solution? Why don't you go ahead and cover that right now?
Having one ERP software, one package enables you to know wall to wall what your availability is, starting with the ERP, through the warehouse, through financials, through analytic. The landed cost become today the most crucial issue. Unless you have very good control of your landed cost, you might end up selling your product below cost or too low price, affecting your next profit.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. having visibility at the shipment level of the actual cost of your shipment, because who owns the freight? Is it you or the customer? But bringing visibility through a transportation control tower and so forth, and being able to see that so that the pass-through can be managed and that trust factor is not lost. Because with the escalating transportation costs, there's a very strong tendency to lose trust with your suppliers and the transportation providers of their actual cost and how it's being parlayed. So that visibility is absolutely critical in these times, and more the reason to have this type software that provides you that information. Dani?
This is a brand new issue we are facing today. The banks. When the banks ask you for your inventory status, or the insurance company asks you for, and you tell them, I need to close my warehouse and take physical inventory, and it will take me 1 week to do it. I got 2 reactions for 2 different institutes. One of them is from the banking industry, but they told me I'd rather lose my client, lose a client than lose my job. Because if the client tell me, take me a week to count my inventory, it means he has inventory that might not be sold. And if he got out of business, the bank's on the inventory. The insurance perspective is, if the client has a fire or hurricane or water damage, the claim is for inventory that might not be sold anyway. So having real-time information and being able to give it to the client in 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes, I will load your inventory or my financial to a spreadsheet and email it to you, is a big factor they consider today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have a question or a comment for you, Dani. What is the major reason why visibility is not sometimes achieved?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What are the major reasons why visibility is not achieved?
Outdated software. When you have outdated software and you buy a third-party warehouse or some other module, you run into integration issues. And then you have corrupted data, and the user have to jump hopscotch from one software module to the other software module, getting inaccurate information. In today's reality, it's disaster.
Yeah,
You can't afford to have such issues.
absolutely. So cycle counting, our goal should be to have our information to be 99.99% accurate, so we don't have to cycle count every 3 months, because our systems are antiquated within our 4 walls, as well as our warehouses that are outside our 4 walls that we manage or we utilize. So having that integration, as Dani mentioned, and having real-time inventory control is so critical to managing these types of situations. And you also watching your obsolescence and overages that you may have in your warehouse is also something that you want to be able to see in real time. Otherwise, you'll end up in this type of situation with way too much inventory and not aligned to your production. Any other final comments here? I think we'll close it out. We're at the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for their participation and great comments. I'll just close it out. A couple slides here. Just remind everyone that EIG, we're 50 companies out there, people, process, data, technology. This is the first of 4 series of webinars. The next webinar will be next month on creating customer demand cadence on the front end of this. And we want to thank you and everyone for joining us and asking the fantastic questions. With that, Greg, do you have any final comments, questions?
One quick one. It's imperative, if it's not obvious, it's imperative to achieve an end-to-end supply chain visibility. So we would advocate be as prepared the best you can to ensure good supply chain performance and good risk management. All the best.
Dani?
Having integrated ERP software is essential today, because if you don't have it integrated software, you run all kind of roadblocks that might create havoc of inventory shortages and not knowing what your cost is of the product coming in.
That's a great point. Just to build on it, what you don't see, you don't know, and what you don't know is going to cost you. So with that, we thank you for your participation, and we look forward to your future participation on this webinars series. Thank you and have a great day, evening,